when we talk about investment, you have to start with who has what money to invest. That's where it starts. And that's why you have to look at incomes and balance sheets of all of the pieces, okay? And what's happened is it's damaged. So there are the holes. And so when we look at that, right now today, a lot will depend on who gets the support. So there's going to be an important redistribution of wealth that is happening today when checks go out and get sent to people to fill in those particular holes. The economy will then readapt. I want to encourage you to think of it as follows. There is a real economy that doesn't, just imagine there's no medium of exchange, that there's no money and credit, that it's just the real economy, the things you have around you and the ability to produce that. And then there's simultaneously this financial economy that has a lot of IOUs, people who have accumulated this buying power, who have a claim on the goods and services purchases, as do the producers. So the amount of claims on these, the debt is a vacuum cleaner on net worth. It's a claim on net worth. And so how that's filled in by the governments and how well it is will be a defining characteristics. I would imagine that what's going to happen is that savings rates are going to rise. That'll be individuals and companies, because everybody wants to assure themselves of safety. It's redefined financially. I imagine that the priorities are going to shift. In other words, the priorities will be into healthcare and building the basics, I imagine. So we're going from a world that was interconnected and worked in a way where the most efficient producers on a global basis would compete with each other to sell things. And so it would be originated wherever it was best, and it was a highly interconnected world and a more efficient world because of that ability to specialize. That won't be anywhere near the same. We're now going to be moving to a self-sufficient world. Not only will individuals want to assure their self-sufficiency, but countries are going to want to have its self-sufficiency because they're also vulnerable. It's a different geopolitical world. So for political reasons and for various reasons, right now, merchandise is being shipped from China to the United States for masks, for ventilators, and so on. That's a vulnerability. I imagine we're going to then want to build those things and build self-sufficiency. When that self-sufficiency is built, it'll make things more inefficient in the process. And so, yeah, the world will look different in that way. First of all, each makes personal choices, and then the system establishes rules. What each person does is a matter of their own preference. Other people will have different priorities, they may have the same. And then there's laws. I think that we're now in a society where we must realize that we're in this society together, and that the large wealth gaps, particularly when they're representing large opportunity gaps, are not fair and they're not productive, because when a large percentage of the population is in a position where they can't have equal education or even adequate food, children, there's no excuse for kids to not be able to have enough food and such things. I think there has to be a reorganization of the priorities, and also people have got to believe it's fair. I think that we're at a risk of losing capitalism, that the swing can be more in the opposite direction. So I hope that there will be a re-engineering. That's before we had this crisis, as you say. I wrote a piece on LinkedIn, it's still on LinkedIn, which is how and why capitalism needs to be reformed. And I think it has to be reformed behind an American dream. What is that American dream? And I think it's something like equal opportunity, but it has to be not just financial help. and giving money away, that has to be converted into productivity, because we can only consume what we can produce. The principles are more relevant for how to deal with bad times and protect yourself about bad times than they were about good times. Let's say the big picture. These adjustments go on for relatively few years in the scope of things. Like this restructuring process will probably take place over, maybe the next 3 to 5 years. And I know that's a long time, but it's not forever. And the human capacity to adapt and invent and come out of this is much greater. You could see in history, these economic difficult periods like we're talking about are relatively brief periods, but they're painful periods. But there's restructuring periods. That's what they basically are. And that amount of adaptability. And so in the future, I think that we should be very excited about the new future. What is that evolution? It has to do with how we think, and about data, and about digital. So through history, there were changes in what mattered. In the old days, it was an agricultural economy, and wealth meant owning land. And then in the Industrial Revolution, wealth meant being able to produce things and make machines and physical things. We're now in a wonderful revolution in terms of the capacity to think and use that in a way. So I would say that that is absolutely probably the most treasured thing in the future. So one's ability to do that, to interact in a digital way and help that kind of thinking, either as a user of it, an effective user of it, or an effective builder of it. I think that that's going to be important. However, there are all sorts of skills of various dimensions. So there are people, we're supporters of trades and trade skills, the importance of having nurses, the importance of having many other jobs. So it'll be wide ranging, and it'll be, it'll increasingly become clear. But I would say understanding your thinking skills or using digital support mechanisms for thinking would be the most valuable.